Ryan?
Good. Okay, Polly, will you read?
I'd love to read. I like reading best of all. So I shall read a tiny piece from chapter 5 by popular request of my family. And what do you need to know in advance? There's a medical student called Carl, and my main character is called Julian, and they're both at university at this stage. They'd finished the bottle of brandy one of Carl's housemates had swiped from a party. Cara prowled the borders of Carl's room, pulled books from shelves, studied the random objects ranged around, picked up some old vertebrae and put them down fast, blew dust from flowers desiccated in wine bottles, her hat fixed at a jaunty angle. She came to a standstill at Carl's microscope. That's what started it. Tracing her finger along a box of slides and looking back at them over her shoulder, but addressing only Carl. Someone I know had a boyfriend who liked to study his own sperm under the microscope. Outrageously flirtatious. Do you ever do that, Carl? I do it every day, he replied, suppressing a smile. He'd unhooked his glasses and was polishing them on the hem of his shirt. He looked up, stopping to meet her gaze, blinking in that way he did without his specs. Mine and other people's. His face was bare without them, vulnerable like a boy who has lost his mother. Verity stopped leafing through piles of CDs and rocked back onto her heels, alert as a terrier at the rattle of the biscuit tin. Really? Yeah, that's what I'm researching. We're testing sperm and its reaction to various chemicals and drugs. He grinned at Cara again. His chevroning eyebrows were the most attractive thing about him. Motility, it's called. Or not. It's complicated. You've kept that very quiet, Verity said. Is it a contraception research project? Yeah, that's why I'm still here. Carl gestured at the room and shrugged. It's got a small grant, so I get paid. And you collect your own samples? Cara looked sideways at him from beneath the brim of the bowler. We work from frozen, mainly. Carl shot a quick glance at Julian and grinned, though we're always looking for donors. Julian snorted, felt himself grow hot. Verity plonked herself close beside him among the cushions, rubbing her hand back and forth along the inside seam of his jeans. A sample was needed. Another bottle of brandy was discovered, followed by chasers of ouzo from Carl's housemate's holiday. On repeat was that tape of Carl's favourite soundtrack, The Mission. Julian could hear it through the wall as he sat on the edge of the lavatory, his jeans round his ankles, Verity on her knees, keen to assist, tugging at him with all the delicacy of a milkmaid. He looked at the glass jar in his left hand and thought of Cara in the other room with Carl. Somehow that helped. Cara had a gap between her front teeth and swingy hair that smelled of apricots, and that shirt on the verge of unbuttoning all evening. Carl had been leaning over her, finally removing the hat as Verity led him from the room with the jar. There was one last look as Cara edged herself up Carl's desk, her skirt sliding to the top of her thighs, Carl's hands already in her hair, and Cara leaning back, so Carl had to stoop over her to kiss her, and at last her shirt fell open, and yes, no bra! And with that, Verity got her sample. The extractor fern whirred and clanked as Verity inspected his cloudy offering, holding the jar to the light, tipping it this way and that until he begged her to stop, felled by pudeur and suddenly sober. Carl prepared the slide and set up the microscope. He slooshed the sample with saline, telling Cara, it has to be around the same salinity as seawater because the sea has the same mineral balance as our bodies. If I mixed it with plain water, they would die. On hand beside him, Cara was like a dental nurse in disarray, her shirt buttoned up wrong. Verity hovered, refusing eye contact with Julian, while Carl continued making tiny adjustments to the microscope, peering through the eyepiece, raising and lowering the platform. Julian was almost tapping his foot with impatience when Carl started jigging, doing a pee-pee dance. Sorry, I'll be quick, he said, dashing from the room. Don't touch anything. While he was gone, Cara rolled a spliff. Verity slumped beside her. Julian fiddled with a deck of cards, trying to remember a trick that his old friend Peace Convoy Raff had shown him the summer he first came in his brightly coloured wreck of a van to his verge on the road out of Horton. Raff's trick was a good one, because not many people knew it. If he could remember how, he'd make all 4 aces rise from the pack. Cara and Verity kept spluttering with laughter. Cara put her hat on Carl's skeleton. The joint was finally passed back to him and tasted hot. They heard the chugging of the flush, and Carl sidled back, looking flustered. "Why don't the three of you finish smoking that thing while I sort this out?" He resumed his work with the microscope. "I might need to change a bulb. Never had one go before," he said, mumbling, shaking his head over the thing. Julian really was very stoned by the time Carl called him over. Carl gripped him by the shoulder. "Take a look," he said, "all swooning around with no particular place to go." And he shushed Verity, telling her to wait her turn. Julian bent the eyepiece. He was oddly moved by what he saw. This constellation, no, more than that, so many of them, each with its own halo, as though lit from within, sparkling, darting, flickering. His very own universe, composed entirely of comets. They seemed so purposeful, so bright and full of promise, that for a moment he felt sad for each and every one of them, for their urgency, for the messages that they would never get to deliver. Thank you.
Gavin, are we okay? We're getting what you need here?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. Thank you, Polly. Thank you, Polly, for such a nice book. No, really, I was probably the last choice to be the interviewer, and I thought, oh my God, what if I don't like the book? We're going to be in deep trouble here. But it's tremendous. It's really a good book, and I have a few questions about it. But first and foremost, where did it come from? What do you start with?
I started with. It's quite tricky without doing spoilers to tell the entire story. No spoilers. But there was a family story to do with my great uncle who committed suicide. And I was 11 when he committed suicide, and so my parents wanted to protect me from that and told me that it was his heart. And when you're a child, you know when you're being lied to, or not exactly lied, because it was his heart was broken. And it was the events that broke his heart that I subsequently found out about that became the germ for the kindness. And I discovered the other day that it's a novel I've been trying to write since my early 20s. But I had no idea that I'd started it.
So, but it was always a novel.
But it was always, well, it was always fiction. I really love short stories, and I've published 2 collections of stories, and I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but in England you're very unpopular if you write short stories because everyone wants you to write a novel.
Oh, this is Canada. We are the home of the short story, so you're
well, hooray for Canada. Well, I decided I was going to be really militant when it came to this one, and I thought I'm going to find a way to make short stories work in England.
Yeah.
So at first it was going to be a novella followed by a series of short stories written by Julian, who's the main character of the first half of The Kindness, but it never quite worked in that form.
So was it a lot of work, this book?
It was 4 years of consistent work, yes.
And did you have to sort of do some stops and starts during the course of it, or did it? I mean, was it relatively straightforward?
I did a lot of stops for research, longer than I thought on Paradise Lost, John Milton's book.
Yeah.
Julian, I have no education, no formal education, and my main character is a scholar of Milton, and I can't write as a scholar of Milton without doing some studying of it myself. And so I knew and loved Paradise Lost, but I hadn't really studied it. And actually I tweeted, I thought it would be really simple. I'd find someone who'd recently studied it and I'd be able to then just pick their brains, and that would kind of do. So I tweeted, anyone here study Paradise Lost? And hundreds of people tweeted back, yes, me. And I said, hooray, can I talk to you about it? And hundreds of people tweeted back, can't remember a word.
Really? Oh my gosh, that's my entire education. Well, no, the reason I asked is because you know, we had a writer here, may he rest in peace, named Alistair MacLeod, and who basically wrote short stories, and he said one time at a thing like this that he always wrote the first sentence and the last sentence, so he knew if he had to pack a lunch. So for him, he was always writing a short story.
Yeah.
Until it got kind of unwieldy. And I was wondering about that, whether that was the case with this book, or whether it was always bigger than a short story.
It was never a short story, but it was a series of, in its original form, it was a series of stories.
Yeah. Well, I'm always, you know, as a reader, I'm always thrilled when an author gives you credit for a certain amount of intelligence. And so I like when, you know, like a couple of years just don't exist in the book. Like you don't feel like you have to write the connection between this period of time and that period of time. You just pick it up and say, okay, well, you can invent anything you want for that interregnum there. So I thought that was really well handled. But the other thing I thought about is that writing a novel must have quite a bit in common with retail. Detail is really important. So there's all these little details in the book, and I thought that you know, one of the reasons I asked where the book came from, because I thought that the descriptions of the house, for example, were very loving and very exact, and I wondered whether the house was something that was really at the center of, you know, the seed of this book.
The house, I wanted an idea of Eden, and the house, Firdausi, the house is called Firdausi, which is, for my own amusement, is in the Quran, is the highest point of paradise. And so I invented a house that was my idea of paradise.
So it doesn't exist, that house? It isn't.
No, it's an amalgamation of lots of places that I know and love, and then some other details, imagined details thrown in.
Oh, it's brilliant. And the other thing that struck me about the book is that these characters are all very nice, and it occurred to me that you must like them.
You know, I adore my characters as though they are members of my family, and a couple of people reviewed it in England and said, oh, they're so awful, these people, and I was
really
deeply hurt, and a lot of people took against Julia, the female character,
really?
Said, oh, she's such a bitch, and I think, well, she just isn't. You know, she's a complicated person, and I feel very defensive when people don't like my characters.
Well, I don't blame you. I thought that you were very sympathetic to all of them, and I thought that required a very fine touch. A lot of the time, I'm appalled. I don't know. I never know what. There's no book reviewers in the crowd, is there? No, I really. So do you read reviews? I mean, do they bother you?
I'm very lucky with reviewers. I'll tell you what really bothers me about one-star reviews on Amazon, which, you know, every author says, I never look at it, but actually everyone does. And you kind of wake up in the morning and you think, oh, I'll just have a look. It's like a sort of OCD thing. And you have a look and someone's put, this is the worst book I've ever read. And you think, really? The worst?
So what's this Amazon thing? I don't think I've ever heard of it.
Don't know.
It's not really. No, that's somebody who's written a book at the same time as you, who asked their cousin to write a bad review of your book.
Yeah, I think so. I always ascribe. Actually, the thing to do is you click on their name and you find that the last thing they bought and reviewed was cat litter. So,
that's right, you did. This is the worst package I ever read. That's right. No, that's good. And do you always have something in process? I mean, do you have short stories on the go?
Not, at the moment, I have nothing. I am empty-headed. And that's...
Geez, we'll get along just fine.
it's a very odd
normal state of affairs, that's right. No, that's good. And so this is the first book that's been published in the US, though, right?
Yeah.
And so you still publish in England with Virago, is that right?
No, I'm with Bloomsbury for all of the English-speaking world.
So it's translated over, because they used to be Virago, right?
Yeah, the first three were with Virago.
Okay. And is Lenny still there?
Lenny was my editor and is still there. We're still friends. I love Lenny. Yeah.
And so is this, I mean, obviously Bloomsbury love you. I mean, they're traveling you all over the country. Is it different, the US? I mean, you've been here before, right? You've come to Canada, right?
Yeah. But different what, being published?
Well, you know, the experience of, you know, like you travel around England and then, you know, maybe you come to Canada and you think, what a barbarian country this is. But then when you go to the United States, it's an entirely different set of, well, like everything is different, right? Actually, we were in LA last week for a week,
and I was struck by how actually it felt very familiar. And sort of less different. And I think maybe England has become more American.
No, that's really interesting.
Unfortunately.
Well, yeah, that's always a possibility.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, I'm just wondering how to sort of.
I'm dreading this
frame
question.
No. The thing is that this novel is very, very complicated, and I just wonder when you're working on something like that, like if you write a short story, it seems to me you probably know where it's going to be at various stages of it. But this novel, I mean, you know, that part that you read actually turns out to be a very pivotal part of the book. So. You know, do you have like charts and things like that, or you keep it all in your head?
It's all in my head. Which, I mean, one of the advantages of a short story is you keep it in your head, and I walk a lot. I walk.
Right. So by the time you write it,
It's just like typing, really, because I've worked the whole thing out, and I try to do that with a novel, and of course that is impossible. But I have no charts, and in fact I don't really know what's going to happen. I've written 2 novels, and in both cases I haven't really known what's going to happen, and it has changed while I've been writing, which can lead to, it's quite a panicky feeling at various points of writing, but you just have to trust your subconscious to sort it out.
Right.
And I do, I really trust my subconscious. I've got a friend who's a very good writer, and in her writing room she has that thing of the wall with the charts and chapter headings, and you know, the places where the action turns and the narrative reverses. And I looked at that, and when I first walked in I felt immense envy, thinking, oh, imagine writing that, none of the sort of tension, just writing beautiful prose and hanging it off this scaffolding. But actually I think I'd be bored stiff if I wrote in that way. I like not quite knowing what's going to happen. I like my characters to feel real enough that they can work it out.
right. Well, and again, that sympathetic approach to your characters obviously plays into that. But then don't you have to go back and sort of tighten up the bolts
Well,
there?
I have a very odd way of working. I start from the beginning every day, so I never have to go back.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And so
No wonder it takes 4 years.
okay. But so you know, you mentioned Rupert Thompson. He told me that he just sits down and writes a draft of a book, and then he writes another draft of a book, and then he writes another draft of a book. Do you work like that?
I think I'm not sure if Rupert uses a computer, so I wouldn't know how many drafts I do, because I do genuinely start a draft from the beginning every day. So yes, it is over and over and over again. So things just organically change as you inch.
Well, how do you know it's finished? I mean, is that what the editors for? They say, okay,
Well,
I've had enough of this.
I could have this book I could have written probably for the rest of my life. I'm never tired of writing it. You know, there comes a point with things where you think lots of other things I've worked on where you think, no, come on, that's enough now. You know, but I'm still waking up in the morning thinking, oh yes, hooray, I'm going to go and write my book again today.
Yeah. All right. I think I don't even have a watch. What time is it, Catherine? 6:53. So I think that we would be able to take a couple of questions, if anybody in the audience has one, of Polly, before we bring in that other guy. Any
He
questions?
may have got stuck in the oyster bar.
Oh yeah, that's right. No kidding. I think they've got the shoehorn to get him out of the oyster bar. Yes. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I just wanted to know, when you were talking about drafting every day, like you start from the beginning, sorry if I missed the point of that, can you expand on that a little bit more? So you actually start at the beginning of the story every day and go over it and say, like, it's working.
So I read up to the point that I need to write. So I read myself into writing, and if I don't read myself into writing, I walk myself into writing, and the way I do that is I walk in the character that I'm writing. So whatever I'm doing I will go and do as that character, because I never just stare at an empty page, because I couldn't do that. I couldn't just stare at an empty page and think, oh right, what shall I write now? I have to kind of, it has to be flowing before I put my hands on the keyboard, I think.
Yes? Sorry.
Hi.
Hi, Polly. Thank you for being here with us. in
Real
Toronto.
pleasure.
My question is, have you ever thought of writing a book about your family, given the very interesting background of your book and your wonderful writing? Because your parents are issued from two of the most extraordinary political advents of the 20th century, and I think it impacted a whole childhood from what I understand from some interviews. And it would be wonderful to have a book about that. Have you ever thought about it?
I do think about it, and I have written small pieces, but both of my parents were, to those who don't know, were child refugees in 1938. My father on the Kindertransport from Germany, and my mother, who is half Chinese, was escaping the Japanese invasion of Shanghai, and ended up in a Dr. Barnardo's, an orphanage in England. So in 1938, as children, they both arrived in England, and rather astonishingly ended up, one of them as a newspaper editor and the other one as a headmistress of an English school. But to answer the question, I suppose at some point it's a story that I will want to tell, but I feel that if I did it now, I'd somehow destroy the source. Although I don't write about them, their stories and family stories sort of do inform everything I write, and certainly inspire everything I write. And somehow using it all up in a memoir would feel like I was squandering it too soon.
Your short stories are beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Well, the prose is extraordinarily elegant. Sorry, you had a question, sir. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hello.
When you write a book or a short stories as opposed to writing lyrics, do you use a different creative process, and is there one aspect you prefer over the other?
Okay, I'm surprised by how similar the process is, and again, it involves a lot of walking. I really think that you know, there are a lot of people who say writing is about putting your bottom on the seat, and I think actually writing is about getting onto your feet and walking with it in your head. For a story song, it's rather similar to writing a short story. It's just shorter and it has to be sung, and so the beats have to fall in the right place. For a song where David's going to sing first person, again, that has some of the same qualities that you need to write fiction, in that I need to voice him as a character almost. You know, it's a sort of empathetic act to try and see the world through someone else's eyes, and I suppose the difference is that he's not a fictional character, he's someone who's readily available and who I know very well.
Well, no, it's interesting that you talk about walking, because my wife, who is very sad that she can't be here tonight, apparently there are writers now who have a treadmill, and then their desk is...
What a great idea!
On top of it. Well, you know, it might be good for some people, but I'd have a hard time with that. But apparently,
the dog would like it.
So you get, you know...
Yeah, that's a very, very good idea. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, well, no, Jan Martel apparently, who's yeah, and I'd never heard of it. I just thought, my God.
But our dog would be heartbroken. Sits patiently waiting for me to run out of inspiration.
No, that's good. And so I'm just wondering about the writing. Have you been writing since you were very young? Because
I don't remember starting.
You're a brilliant writer.
Thank you.
Well, no, I mean, you could tell, I'm sure all of you, if you haven't read the book, just that passage that was read, this is remarkably accomplished and affecting prose. I think it was just brilliant. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. So are we, Barry? Are we ready to bring David in or not? Yes. No. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, David Gilmour. Are you okay there? Is your mic on?
Very comfortable.
Okay, good.
Do you need to plug your iPhone in?
Oh, there's another Jack there somewhere. I think you might be sitting there. David, I have a question for you. What's it like being married to a fiction writer? You bring your friends home and tell them, be careful what you say?
Anything that they say may be used in evidence or is in inspiration. This is true. I get to hear every paragraph.
You're the first reader?
I am the first reader, generally speaking. I am either read it or I am read to.
That's excellent.
And I suppose I'm the sounding board. I don't know how good at it I am, but that's...
Well, the
that's
results
way.
would speak to everybody pulling their weight, as far as I'm concerned. And there's no jealousy. There's no professional jealousy. I remember reading Ed O'Brien's biography.
No, of course not.
No, that's good. That's brilliant. And you dedicate your books to him. I think that's really nice.
Well, actually, this one's dedicated to my father. So it was dedicated to David, and then I changed it because my father died once.
Oh my God.
It's not funny. I have that awful laughing when things are not funny thing.
Well, no, it's interesting because one of the things that I thought you nailed in this book was the male experience of childbirth. So I wonder, David, did you have some input into that? Or Polly, were you just imagining that? Because
I think Polly sort of lives in character. I don't know quite how she does it. She walks it and thinks it, and examines the people who are going past, and it comes from her very, very fertile imagination. I can't
And actually
say that I'm very helping there.
The birth in this book is not at all like any birth that you've ever witnessed, I don't think, because it was a hospital.
Witnessed a few.
well, no, but I thought it really got me. I mean, one of my children is here tonight, and it never failed to affect me, and that initial connection is so amazing, and so I thought that was I thought it was extremely well done, but I just wondered, okay, was that something that was daunting to you to take that on?
To write a birth from a male point of view, no more than anything. I mean, writing from a male point of view, which I've done in several stories before this book, it doesn't feel daunting any more than writing as any different person.
Right. Well, so does David say, you know what?
Do you know the most daunting bit? And I don't know how to. There's no polite way of talking about this. There's a moment when Julian, in his grief, finds the cast-off jumper of his former love, and I put off writing the scene for a very, very long time, and he I wish I hadn't started this.
That's quite all right. Don't worry about it. You don't have to go to the end of that.
Okay.
But again,
Going back to where she started.
But so on that occasion, David, I think, was in the studio and wasn't available, so I had to ask another male friend whether he had any advice, because I finally had to write the scene of masturbation with this jumper, and he said, "Make it cashmere."
Picky.
And that was Damien Barr, who you may know.
Of course, no, that's excellent. So now, you guys work together. How does that work?
I managed to sort of strong-arm Polly into helping me write lyrics and to ultimately pretty much take over the job by getting her at a weak moment and pushing her until, because she has a way with words.
Yeah, obviously.
And as a writer.
And so again, we're talking about collaboration now. What comes first, the music or the words?
Well, the words come after the music, generally speaking.
Right, so you just lay down some music and say, okay.
There's one song, which is the one louder than words on the last Pink Floyd album a year or so ago, that Polly had written. She'd heard all these pieces of music, but she didn't know which one it was going to fit to. And she wrote some words which sort of serendipitously just fit amazingly well on the song, given out of words.
So did you write poetry at some?
All my life, but very secretly.
Well, it's not a secret anymore.
No, I've told everyone now.
And so does it change though? That's how you've written a book between the boards. You can't do anything with it. So now you write a song. David's up there on stage, comes back and says, you know what? How about if you know? I'm not sure if that's quite right. I mean, is there an evolution in the song that there is not in, you know, once you publish the book, you can't really go back and say,
No.
oh man, you know what? I
Yeah.
just wish I'd done that.
Polly's process of walking and thinking and being ready to type the moment she gets back continues pretty much into the lyrics, so that I very rarely have to say a word, luckily.
Not bad.
She just seems to nail it every time. And we have this wonderful moment where we pop into a recording studio room that we've got next to the house, and we just sit there and we try them. And you know, occasionally you've got to adjust a phrase a little bit so it fits the scansion of that the music dictates. And those are truly kind of magical moments when you have this eureka moment. You say, God, it just fits. And it, and sometimes when you read the words before you've sung them, they have a certain meaning to them. And when you attach the two together, stitch them tightly together, they take on a different meaning. That it's a magical thing.
Well, but
it's really, really exciting the first time.
Yeah,
You actually hear the words coming back and see, God, they just fit like a glove, and they enhance something that was already within the music.
I think David should play a clip of something to show what it is he gives me, because it isn't that
okay with that,
just
people, right? Yeah, okay.
Because what tends to happen is he will put a track onto my iPod, and I don't write just to a piece of music. I get him to scat a melody, and quite often it's like interpreting tongues, because it is as though the words are just lurking under the surface, and the only way to really illustrate that is for him to play one of the things that he put, one of the demos, I think.
Which one, Polly?
Doing any tongue.
In any
And,
time. Three versions of
we'll do one with the scat on it.
that. Yes, I should have the scatter, yes. Where's my sound engineer son? Are you sorted out, Gabriel? Well, it's working. I think it's working. Maybe turn it up a little bit if you know where the volume is from.
I don't.
Sorry, technology, we're getting there. Don't worry.
I'll carry on
We're more
chatting,
slick
shall I?
than as usual. Hang on, here we go. We're going to start right away.
Is that at your end? I think?
What has he done? Yeah, it's not working. I'll stay up. See, it's just...
Anyway,
Anyway, so that's what I get. But without all the glitches.
it's like speaking in tongues, and Polly has to decipher what she thinks might be being said there.
But as a writer, that satisfaction is much more immediate, isn't it? I mean, you know, suddenly you put the words into that, and it's there. Whereas you write a book, and
Yeah, no,
who knows what's going to happen to that?
I have to be very careful because David gets quite attached to words. And so, for example, there was a song called, I think it was Today. There was just a line I just couldn't get, and so I just filled in a wide Sargasso sea full of shit, and sort of just thought, oh, I'll rewrite that bit later. But I was desperately excited about hearing him sing it to see whether the general thing would work. So he sang this thing, and he sang Wide Sargasso, and then he got really attached to the Wide Sargasso. He's like, no, I think that's really good. We should keep it. No, let's not. Let's think of something else there.
What's the vote? Should we get the White Sargasso sea full of shit? See, darling.
So, how about you? You've had a spectacular career.
Yep.
Well, no, but you know, you getting tired of it? No, but you know, I was just talking. I was talking to Barry. I was talking to your son. I mean, you spend a lot of time on the road.
I don't spend much time on there. This is nothing. I'm spending a month now. I spent a month before Christmas, a month last summer, and another month. That's a total of 4 months in about a year. And I haven't done it for 10 years, so it's hardly overwork. And it is great. I'm really enjoying it right at the moment. It's fantastic. But I have just spent sort of 10 years, not exactly in hibernation, but slowly, very slowly, working on the songs that have become this album. And last time I vowed that I would get another album out within 2 or 3 years. It wouldn't take quite as long as it had the previous time, but of course I blew that. And again, I am vowing that it won't take 10 years.
And the performances, I mean, you still get the same satisfaction out of that?
Yep, it's terrific. It's been really good. We've just, we're playing.
Packed houses everywhere, right? I mean, these are, both the concerts here are sold out, I think, right?
Yeah.
And do you travel with David normally? Or
Yeah,
not?
yeah.
Always?
Always. I think, in fact, we do it in the school holidays so that the kids can travel too. Although they're all so grown up now that school holidays have become irrelevant for most of them.
Yeah, all these little bits of tour that we're doing are in school holidays. So
But that must make it a little bit easier to take then, right? The traveling, to have your family with you.
Yeah, it's lovely. They're lovely, aren't you, children?
Yeah, that's right. Gabriel said his birthday was going to be between Poland and somewhere else, so they've got it all sorted out.
Yes, that's somewhere else.
How are we doing for time, guys? Are we... Fran, where are we at?
There's 5-10 minutes.
Okay, good. What about, do any of you have any questions? Sir?
First of all, thank you for doing this. David,
It's my pleasure.
When putting a set list together from the vast career you've had, both solo and Pink Floyd, how do you sequence all that and say, what's the process for doing it?
It's very, very difficult. I mean, you could start off in any number of ways, and you just write lists out until they start looking like something. Polly had a lot of input into the set lists that we did this time. I don't know, we just sit there until it, and then you try them out in rehearsal, and sometimes you realise that one song just doesn't naturally flow into another one. And there are a few tricks of the trade that you use to work out how to build up to a crescendo at the end, all that sort of showbiz stuff, which helps.
Thank you very much.
Sir?
Hi, David. What has changed about your songwriting from the days of the Pink Floyd to Rattle That Lock?
You tell me. I just, I write pieces of music. Sometimes I struggle painfully through the lyric writing process, or I persuade Polly to.
Are you happy to be rid of that? Is that something, that,
Sorry.
was the lyrics, was that a problem for you, or?
I've written quite a few lyrics of which I'm proud and I think are great, but Polly's method of walking and thinking hasn't so far clicked into gear.
But what I did this time, which I think did work, was I shut him in a room with a piece of paper and no internet, and said he was coming out and he'd written something himself, because I don't want to enable him to never write a lyric again.
Had a little hatch made in the door. Occasionally food.
Rattle that lock.
She'd say, how many words have you written? I say, well, 3 since 7 o'clock this morning.
And so, do you always have music on the go? I mean, are there little things
Yes.
rattling around in your head?
Constantly. Yes. I have hundreds and hundreds of little morsels of music, which I re-listen to again when a project is finished, to see if there are any that inspire me to start working. And the work is a bit like, pushing a snowball down a hill. It gathers its momentum. It becomes, I'm very lazy at the beginning, and I've become more obsessive as time ticks on. I become more and more involved with the new music.
And so when the words are right, then that must be immensely satisfying for you, because here's this music that's been kicking around in your head, and then suddenly it does have that polish to it. That it's like cutting a diamond.
It's alchemy. It's alchemy. There's songs that I have had no real idea how to put into words what it's about, let alone write the lyrics. Polly will just suddenly nail.
And Polly, do you have sort of ideas going in, or do you just play off the music?
Just off the music, really. I suppose the one song that I really wanted, where I had an idea before I'd ever heard a piece of music, was the title track of Rattle That Lock, because I had been thinking a lot about protest and the fact that it's very important that people feel free to protest and in fact have the right to protest, and that even if you can't change something, that you're going to feel better if you do actually just go and shake your fist at something you disagree with. And so I knew I wanted to write a song on that subject, but I think that's the only one where there's been something I've been burning to say. The rest has all been prompted very much by the music.
Matthew, yes?
Yeah, I'd like to say, first of all, it's a bad cliche, but you two do make beautiful music together. Thank you for that. And I'm wondering if, Polly, do you ever weigh in on a chord progression, or do you have any musical background at all, or would that be too cheeky?
Oh, yes. She's distantly related to Felix Mendelssohn.
And rather closely related to Ronaldo Hahn.
You've been asked that before, I think.
No.
Oh, okay.
He just won't use my guitar solos, and I don't know why. Really, really annoying.
Yes, Beth.
Well, I want to say that Faces of Stone is one of my favorite songs on the album, and it's my understanding that you wrote that one.
Mostly. Polly helped a little bit.
But Yellow Dress is my second favorite, and it amazes me. A lot of people have a hard time keeping a marriage together, and the fact that you two work so well together is just, it's brilliant.
Yeah, bravo. Congratulations.
It's a joy and a privilege.
Sir,
I saw the last 4 shows the past week in LA, and thank you for that. It was so great to be on the 3 shows. And I'm curious, would you consider?
Hardcore.
Yeah. Would you consider playing Echoes in Pompeii?
I greatly doubt it. I don't think I could pull Echoes off without Rick.
Right, exactly.
I'm sorry. I mean, we've talked about this, but it's a piece for the 2 of us to play on, and I've scrubbed that off my list now.
oh, Echoes, I tell you. I was telling Matthew.
But I can see why you think it would be a good one to do in Pompeii, and I agree with you. But yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
You spoke about Polly, how your creative process and lyrics. Do you ever the same feedback on Polly's work?
Well, as I said before, she does read to me, and at every stage of her writing process during a book, and
And I plagiarised you in this one, in fact. I stole one of his lyrics. Very helpful of him.
One last question, sir, at the back there.
Yes, good evening. My name is Gord. I just drove in from Ottawa and it was well worth the trip. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. Polly, behind every great man is a great woman. And my question for both of you is I'd love to know what type of music you are both listening to these days.
I've been so busy listening to myself and being obsessed about every note, every chord change, every little bit, and then with Polly's help, putting the words on them. That I haven't listened to anything for the last 2 or 3 years except my own stuff.
And Nick Cave's brilliant album.
Nick Cave's last album, Push the Sky Away, was a couple of years ago. That was kind of like the old days for me, where when I was young, you used to buy an album and you would obsess on that one album till you knew every word, every note of it for months, until you gradually cross-faded into another one. And Nick Cave's one.
And Polly, what about you? Who do you read?
Who do I read? Oh God, I read everyone. I can't answer who do I read. At the moment I'm reading a new novel by Sarah Moss. I don't know if she's published here. It's very good. Who else have I got with me? I've just read Jill Dawson's new one. Also, I don't know if she's published here.
It's about Patricia Highsmith, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I love Jill Dawson.
It's and it's a fantastic book. She is, I think, one of the most underrated British writers.
No, I agree. But she doesn't pick easy things to write about.
No, and the other thing I think is that those of us who know her, her name is Ruby. How much more success would she have as Ruby Dawson?
No, kidding.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, those are your books, Tom. So, I think we have to wrap it up. Yes, Fran, sir, the Australian guy. Let's give him another question. Go ahead. This guy walked all the way from Australia.
I managed to get tickets for all 11 shows, so thank you to both of you for
How did you do that?
I sat up all night, I was waiting, watching, and as soon as I hit the button, refresh, or just get great, next city, and I was up all night doing that, the announcement, and I just, since you put out the last album that you worked on together, just thought it was the most beautiful thing, and I just had to start saving money, annual leave, wherever you were going, I had to be there. So it's just fantastic. But thank you so much for the music and for the words. I'm just wondering, like with the process of writing musically, like your natural style is very the trick is things that are very visual to me, like the spaces and areas, and it's very feeling as well. And I just wondered, like, do you have a feeling that you will sort of try to explain, and Polly might work off that kind of direction?
I can't analyze it or explain it. There's little tiny moments that I capture, and these days I capture them with an iPhone from wherever it comes. On Rattle That Lock, it's a noise on a train station in France. Otherwise, it's a piece of music that I start singing in my head or strumming on a guitar. And once you've got the tiny moment, it can be less than 10 seconds long. You think that is the thing, put it away and come back to it at some point. And then you hit the perspiration where you work and work and work to try and turn it into something. But there's no clever plan. I have no idea what I'm doing, basically. It's just.
And often Phil Manzanera is the person who works with David and will listen to these moments and be able to say, that one, come on, think about that one.
Phil has on 2 tracks on this album, in fact, on Rattle That Lock and Today, he had listened through just to piles of my little tiny musical snippets and joined them together and completely disparate pieces that were not, in my mind, connected, and they became those 2 songs. So he's an invaluable asset.
And the words feed in, so like that line about the sea, like the sea meets the shore and soothes it with the song. I mean, it's just like that whole track. When I first heard that, it was just like, oh, life, you know, like just the moments. And I think like there's a beauty in that simplicity. Like all of the words in that are primary school words in that line, but it's just the images.
Thank you.
It's beautiful and works really well.
Claire, last question, go ahead.
I'm lucky enough to know you both a little bit.
Who are you? Sorry.
I mean, I've always thought about, I've often pondered and been interested in the sort of alchemy of your relationship. But one of the things I've thought about a lot recently is trust. Because it seems to me that you have, in order to achieve the extraordinary things you achieve together as artists and independently as artists, there has to be an enormous amount of trust between you, which is, of course, a key element of a great marriage. But it's trusting your own creative process, it's trusting someone else's creative process, it's trusting on a bad day that it will still be there, it's finding it on a good day. Is that, am I right? Am I along the right line?
Yeah, I mean, I've had to trust David. When he first got me to write lyrics, I didn't intend to write lyrics. I was actually ill in bed, and this was, you know, and I was only a child. And he was in the grown-ups were in the studio, and he would come back, you know, in the evening and play this music, and I had a temperature of 104, and I would just sort of, he'd say, oh, I just need some words to sing, and I would be lying there with this fever and sort of saying whatever first came into my head, and then once the fever had dropped, I realised he'd been writing it down and sort of and they were starting to sort of form into verses, and I thought, oh God, this is actually going to be awful for me, because it was the early 90s, and he said, I'd really like you to write these lyrics, you know, and I thought, oh God, you know, everyone's going to say that I'm Yoko Ono, and at the time that seemed like a really terrible thing to be, and I've thought about that since. I thought, actually, I'd really love to be Yoko Ono. She's a woman in her 80s, she's producing great art, she's never stopped producing art, she has no inhibitions. What a great woman to aspire to being. Why would I care if someone said Yoko Ono? But back then, you know, it felt really, really tough. And Pink Floyd being a very male kind of thing, with a very male, I thought, audience, it just seemed like sticking my neck well above the parapet. And so David promised that, you know, that if I wrote the lyrics, he wouldn't put my name on them, that he would, you know, pay me, hooray, but he wouldn't put my name on them. And then when the album was finished, he said, I'm sorry, I lied to you, I am going to put your name on them. And I was sort of horrified, but he said, you know, just trust me on this. You will be glad that you've been credited for your work, because it feels awful to not be credited for your work, and you just need to trust me. And he was right, because now all these years later, I would hate to not have my name on them. And please, call me Yoko Ono.
All right, thank you, Polly, thank you, David. Thank you, everybody in the audience. Thanks for coming out tonight. And I really have to say thanks to George Gibson from Bloomsbury, who may have left already to get a flight, and to Trish Bunnett from Penguin Random House here, who really put this together.
Thank you, George. It's a beautiful show.
And so Polly will sign copies of her book over there where Trish is, and I think they've got some kind of system set up where they put your name on. Yeah, you guys can go ahead right now. They'll put your name on a post-it note and stuff, so that you don't have to spell the weird name. Here, I'll take that. The weird method of Sandra that you have to use your name, and I'll catch up to you guys.